On Christmas Eve in 2002, a pregnant woman vanishes without a trace. There's no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no witnesses to explain what may have happened. Her purse was at home. Her keys were left at home. Her car remains in the driveway. And yet, she is gone. At first, it feels like a missing persons case. But as the days pass, something darker begins to surface. Because the person that was closest to her may not be as he seems. This is the case of Laci Peterson. Hi, guys. I'm Holly Mae Cormier. Thanks for being here. Today's case that we're going to be doing a deep dive on is one of the most haunting cases in modern history. Laci Peterson, a young, vibrant woman who was 8 months pregnant when she vanished on Christmas Eve in 2002. Now, I've covered the Laci and Scott Peterson case in a short video, but this video is going to be a deep dive into all of the case details and some lesser known facts about Scott and Laci's relationship. So what makes this case so unsettling isn't just what happened, but the questions that still surround it. Even decades later, this case is still asking, was justice truly served? Laci Peterson was born May 4th, 1975 in Modesto, California. That makes her a Taurus, often described as grounded, loyal, and deeply connected to the people that she loves. From an early age, Laci was known for her warmth and her natural ability to make people feel comfortable. Friends described her as kind, easygoing, and someone who genuinely enjoyed taking care of others. She grew up in a close-knit family and maintained strong relationships throughout her life. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, checked in on people, and she created a home wherever she went. Now, as she got older, Laci developed a love for life's simple moments. She enjoyed decorating, hosting, and spending time with loved ones. She gravitated toward creating stability and comfort, creating a life that felt safe and full. Laci attended the California Polytechnic State University, where her life was about to change in a way that she never could have predicted. Because this is the place where she would meet her future husband. Scott Peterson was born on October 24th, 1972, making him a Scorpio. Scorpio is often associated with intensity, charm, and complexity. He grew up in a large family as the youngest child. He was described as charismatic and well-liked. People that knew Scott said that he had an easy way of connecting with others. He was confident, social, and able to present himself in a way that drew people in. When Scott met Laci in college, their connection formed rather quickly. They began dating, even though they went to the same college. They actually met at a cafe that Scott worked at. Laci came on strong. She gave him her number and he didn't call her, so she went back there and asked him, "Why didn't you call me?" And his response was essentially, "I thought it was some sort of a joke that such a pretty girl wanted me to give her a call." So she wrote down her number again, gave it to him, and that was that. They went on a date, and ever since then, they were kind of inseparable. I mean, to friends and family, they looked like a happy couple. They were very stable. They hosted gatherings. They spent time with their loved ones. And they appeared to be moving forward in a way that many young couples do. Eventually, they got married and they decided to start a family. And in 2000, Laci became pregnant with their son, Connor. It should have been one of the most happiest times in their lives. But beneath the surface, something is already beginning to fracture, and not all is as it seems. So, before Scott and Laci were even married, Laci had gone to surprise Scott at his apartment with a surprise visit from her. And she actually caught him in bed with another woman. She had told her mom about it, and her mom was like, "Hey, you gotta leave him. He cheated on you." Laci, for whatever reason, wasn't ready to give up on Scott and their relationship. That was red flag number one. I mean, kind of wish that she did leave him at that point, but something in her just was compelled to stay by his side after catching him cheating on her. So they continued dating and they eventually got married. And sources say that Scott and Lacey had decided when they got married that it was just going to be them. They were not planning on having children. Scott was very vocal about not wanting to have children, and Lacey kind of played along with this. I don't know if she played along with it or if at the time of them getting married, she actually didn't want children herself. But me personally, I think that she thought once they got married, he would change his mind, and she didn't want to give up on marrying Scott because she was so in love with him. And one day, months into their marriage, she had shared with her mother that she stopped taking her birth control pills. Her mother said to her, "Are you sure that that's a good idea?" And she said, "Yes, he's going to be a good dad." So she did end up getting pregnant, and this was supposed to be one of the happiest times in their life. She thought, "It's fine. He loves me. We are going to have a family and he will adjust and he's going to see how great it is to be a father and for us to have our little family." But it didn't exactly turn out that way. And I think we all know that. Let's fast forward to the day that Lacey vanishes. It's December 24th, 2002. And the day begins like any other morning. It's a quiet, ordinary morning in Modesto, California. Now, according to Scott Peterson, the morning unfolded absolutely normal. He said that Lacey, 8 months pregnant at the time, was moving a little bit slower than normal, but she just had a regular day planned. And that included focusing on her plans for the day, which was she was watching Martha Stewart Living at Home and thinking about mopping the floors, maybe taking the dog for a walk. So Scott reportedly left the home at 9:30 that morning to take his boat out fishing. He was going to the Berkeley Marina, which is about 90 miles away from their home. It's a long drive and it's Christmas Eve. That's red flag number one. I mean, what kind of a man leaves his very pregnant wife on Christmas Eve to go fishing by himself so far away? He said goodbye. He got into his truck and he left. That is the last time, according to his testimony, that he saw his wife, Lacey. Now, less than an hour later at around 10:18 a.m., something unusual happens. A neighbor spots a dog wandering alone, and the dog is Mackenzie, Lacey's golden retriever. The neighbor recognizes him and brings him back to the Peterson home. She places him in their backyard via the side yard gate. She closes the gate behind him and assumes that everything is fine. At the time, it doesn't seem urgent. Dogs get loose. People step out. It happens. Maybe she was busy running off somewhere herself and didn't have time to fully assess the situation and check on Lacey or Scott. But in hindsight, that moment becomes one of the earliest signs that something is very wrong because Lacey is nowhere in sight. So as the day continues, there's no confirmed sightings of Lacey. Hours pass quietly. Then at 2:15 p.m., Scott Peterson leaves a voicemail on Lacey's cell phone. His voice is calm and he simply says, "Hey, beautiful, it's 2:15. I'm leaving Berkeley." There's nothing in his tone that suggests concern. But there's rarely anything in Scott Peterson's tone that is anything resembling something other than an empty shell. I mean, like anything that this guy does, it sounds like a routine message to a wife he expects to hear from later. So later that afternoon, Scott returns home. Lacey's car is parked in the driveway. Her purse is inside the house. Her keys are still there. Nothing appears to be out of the ordinary. There's no signs of struggle, no broken items, and no forced entry. Just a quiet home that he walks into. But Lacey is gone. Concern begins to build because still Lacey's not home. No one has heard from her. Scott picks up the phone and he decides to call her mother and see if she has heard from her daughter, Lacey. She has not. He reaches out to friends. No one has seen or heard from Lacey all day. So as the hours pass, concern turns into panic. Eventually, police are called. Officers arrive at the Peterson home just before 6 p.m. and begin assessing the situation. They walk through the house carefully, taking note of what is present and what is missing. Almost immediately, something stands out. Lacey has left behind all of her essential belongings: her phone, her wallet, her car, her purse, all left at home. For someone described as organized and routine oriented, this behavior does not make any sense. And disappearing without telling anyone is not something that Lacey would do. She was a reliable woman. She kept her family and friends in the loop on her day. It was just completely out of character. So, as news spreads of this missing 8-month pregnant woman, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Friends, family members, neighbors, and eventually strangers begin organizing search efforts. Within days, hundreds of volunteers arrived to help. Search teams combed through parks, fields, and nearby areas. Even search dogs were brought in. Helicopters were scanning nearby parks in their neighborhood, and flyers with Lacey's photo were distributed all around the neighborhood by friends, family, and volunteers. Her smiling face, visibly pregnant, becomes impossible to ignore. Yellow ribbons are tied around trees throughout Modesto, symbolizing hope and support. For a brief moment, the community and eventually the entire country unites around a single hope: that Lacey and her unborn child will be found alive. So, in addition to these search efforts, flyers being put up everywhere, family and friends working a command center, answering with people calling in tips on possible sightings of Lacey. People also gather in silence, holding candles, praying, and hoping for her safe return. Scott Peterson attends these vigils. He stands among the crowd, speaking to others, appearing composed. He says the right things, but to some observers, something just feels off about this guy. Not wrong enough to accuse, but not quite right either. So, in the early days of the investigation, Scott Peterson was not named a person of interest or a suspect in her disappearance. To the outside world, he is a concerned husband whose wife has gone missing. But behind the scenes, investigators have already begun taking a closer look at him. Detectives later described Scott as unusually calm. There was something off about his overall demeanor. He never pushed aggressively for updates. He just didn't display the urgency that some may expect from someone in his position. Of course, people react to trauma in different ways. There's no single correct response, but investigators do note that his behavior feels very detached, almost as if he is observing the situation rather than living through it. So his story also raises questions. He says that he went fishing that morning alone at a marina nearly 90 miles away from home on Christmas Eve, while his wife is 8 months pregnant and could pop any day. Of course, they wanted to examine this a little bit more closely, like why choose that location and why go alone? One explanation for this is he just really loved fishing. He wanted to take out his new boat. And another reason that he went alone and didn't bring his pregnant wife is because she was known to get very seasick. One of their first dates that he had planned for them was when they chartered a boat, and she just spent the entire time puking. She really appreciated the thought and the effort that he put into it, but sailing and boats just weren't her thing. But maybe he shouldn't have gone. So the boat, let's talk more about the boat. Scott had purchased his boat just a few weeks prior to Lacey's disappearance, and very few people knew about this boat. Not Lacey's family, not their close friends. I mean, it's a small detail, but I don't know. You buy a boat, like, wouldn't you want to flex a little bit and tell people, hey, I bought a boat. You want to go fishing? Like, I feel like you would show that off a little bit. Why would he keep that a secret? So, despite all of these concerns, Lacey's family stuck by Scott. They wanted to support him. They never pointed a finger at him, not in the early days. They believe that Scott loved her. They trust him. They stand beside him during searches and during public appearances. At this stage, there is no clear reason not to. He is her husband, the father of her unborn child, and he was the person closest to her. But that trust is about to be shaken because investigators receive information that's going to change everything. A woman comes forward. That woman's name, Amber Fry. And what she tells police will completely alter the direction of this case. So on December 30th, 2002, just 6 days after Laci Peterson has been reported missing, investigators receive a call that changes the entire direction of their investigation. This call comes from a woman named Amber Fry. Fry is a massage therapist in Fresno, California, and she tells detectives something that immediately raises alarms. She tells them that she's been dating Scott Peterson and is his girlfriend. Amber explains that she met Scott on November 20th, 2002, after being set up on a blind date by a friend. They met at a restaurant, talked for hours, and quickly formed a connection. But from the very beginning, that connection was built on a lie. Scott told her that he was single. He never mentioned that he had a wife. He never mentioned that his wife was 7 months pregnant at the time of their meeting. To Amber, he was just a man looking for a relationship. And as she continues speaking with investigators, the details became even more disturbing. She tells them that early on in their relationship, Scott had told her that he lost his wife and that this would be his first Christmas without her. Weeks before Lacey had disappeared, he's saying that he already lost his wife. Now, it was like fast and furious between him and Amber. They reportedly slept together on their very first date. She got him to pick up her child from preschool on more than one occasion, and she only knew this man for 1 month. And I mean, it just seems like really fast and really irresponsible on her part as well. I mean, I'm not slut shaming her or anything like that. It's just like, who you really brought like a killer around like your child. You just met this guy. She also reportedly put him on her Christmas card that she had sent out to friends and family. I don't know. Regardless, Amber was a big help to investigators. They asked her if she would assist in getting some testimony from him and secretly recording him in their conversation. So over the next several weeks, Amber speaks with Scott multiple times while investigators listen in. And what stands out is not just what he says, but how he says it. His tone is calm, conversational, and even affectionate. In one of the most well-known calls, Scott tells Amber that he is in Paris celebrating New Year's Eve and watching fireworks. But at that exact moment, Scott is not in Paris. He is standing in Modesto, just miles away from a candlelight vigil being held for his missing wife. While people gather to pray for Lacey's safe return, Scott is on the phone with his mistress, pretending to be in another country when he's standing in the middle of a candlelight vigil being held for his missing wife and unborn son, maintaining the illusion, living a completely separate life. For investigators, this behavior is deeply concerning. It suggests not just deception, but a level of emotional detachment that is difficult for us normal people to explain. So for months, the search for Lacey continues. Leads are followed, areas are searched, tips are investigated, but there's no confirmed sightings of Lacey. No clear answers. Time just like ticks on. I can only imagine what her mother and father went through and the rest of her family, what they were thinking and the thoughts that were going through their head. But in April 2003, everything changes. On April 13th, a couple walking along the shoreline of the San Francisco Bay near Richmond, California, discovered something horrifying. They found the remains of a fetus. And the following day, a jogger finds additional human remains nearby. Authorities quickly began testing, and sure enough, everyone's biggest fears finally were confirmed that the remains belonged to Laci Peterson and to her unborn son, Connor. The discovery is devastating, and it transforms the case overnight. What began as a missing person investigation now becomes a homicide investigation. So there is one detail that immediately stands out to investigators at this point in time: the location where the bodies are found. It happens to be in the very same place that Scott said he was fishing the morning of Lacey's disappearance. This connection becomes one of the most significant points in the entire case against Scott Peterson because it ties his timeline directly to where Laci and Connor were ultimately discovered. Now, some people who seem to think that Scott Peterson is innocent argue that this was a well-known fact in the media. Anybody who actually is responsible for the murder of Laci Peterson could have easily planted their bodies there and pointed directly at Scott. So following the discovery, investigators begin to take a closer look at the physical evidence connected to Scott Peterson. A few details emerge as prosecutors will later present in court. First, a strand of hair consistent with Laci's is found wrapped around a pair of pliers in Scott's boat. Secondly, investigators confirm that Scott had purchased a boat shortly before Laci had gone missing, and that he hadn't even told people that he had purchased the boat in the first place. Then there was the issue of some man-made anchors. Detectives discover evidence suggesting that Scott may have made some homemade concrete anchors where he stored his boat. However, when they examine the boat, only one anchor is present. The others are never recovered. Prosecutors later argue that these anchors were used to weigh down Laci's body in the water where he dumped her. So on April 18th, 2003, Scott Peterson is placed under arrest. The circumstances surrounding his arrest raise even more questions because he is found near a golf course in La Jolla, California, not from the Mexican border. His hair has been dyed blonde, bleached blonde. And inside his vehicle, police discover several suspicious items, including his brother's driver's license, a large amount of cash, multiple cell phones, and of course, the brother's ID that doesn't belong to him. So to investigators, these details suggest the possibility that he was preparing to leave. Scott, however, maintains his innocence. He insists that he had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance or her death. So the trial begins in June of 2004. It quickly becomes one of the most followed cases in history. Because of the intense media attention, the trial is moved from Modesto to Redwood City, California. But by this point, public opinion is very divided. Some people believe the evidence clearly points to Scott. Others believe the case relies too heavily on circumstantial evidence. So the prosecutors present a theory centered on motive. And that theory was that Scott wanted his freedom. He wanted to escape his life. He wanted to escape the marriage, escape fatherhood, and continue his relationship with Amber Frey without responsibility or consequence. They point to his strange behavior and the timeline of evidence of planning and intent. The defense takes a different approach. They argue that investigators focused on Scott way too early and failed to fully explore other possibilities on who could have hurt Laci. They suggest that Laci could have been abducted while walking the dog. They highlight the lack of direct evidence, and there was no definitive proof or how or when Laci was even killed. They remind the jury of a critical legal standard. Guilt must be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So one of the most powerful moments throughout the whole trial was Amber Frey's testimony. So Amber Frey takes the stand and she calmly explained her relationship with Scott and the lies that he told her. Then the recordings are played. Jurors hear Scott's voice for themselves. And I'm going to let you guys listen to some of these snippets because they are quite chilling.
And traveling during the last couple of weeks. I've lied to you when I've been traveling.
Okay.
The girl I'm married to, her name is Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
She disappeared just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
For the past 2 weeks, I've been in Modesto with her family and mine, searching for her.
Okay.
She just disappeared, and no one knows
Okay, now,
where she's been.
Scott,
And I can't tell you more because I need you to be protected from the media and Diana. Okay, they are amazing.
Scott,
Yeah.
are you listening?
I am.
You came to me earlier in December and told me that you had lost your wife. What was that about?
She's alive.
What?
She's alive.
Where? She's alive? Where?
In Modesto. Now, I know, this is the hardest. I wanted to tell you first. You need to protect yourself from the media.
Okay.
Okay, if you've been watching the news at all, well, you haven't. The media has been telling everyone that I had something to do with her disappearance. So the past 2 weeks, I've been hunted by the media, and I don't want you to be involved in this to protect yourself. I know that I've destroyed, and I hope so much that this doesn't hurt you.
How could it not affect me?
It does. And
How can you possibly think that this would not affect me?
Amber, I know it does. But I know I've just been torn up the last 2 weeks wanting to tell you, and I'm so weak that I haven't, and I just hope that I had to call you and tell you that.
You never answered my question, Scott.
Sweetie, you don't, I can't say anymore.
I think I deserve.
You deserve so much better. There's no question you deserve so much better.
Yeah, and I deserve to understand an explanation of why you told me you had lost your wife and this was the first holidays you'd spend without her. That was December 9th. You told me this, and now all of a sudden your wife's missing? Are you kidding me? Did you hear me?
I did. I don't know what to say.
I think an explanation would be a start.
I know you absolutely deserve an explanation.
Yes, I do. I do.
And I want to give you one.
I'm listening.
I can't now. I mean, you don't understand. You don't understand the situation.
Then why don't you fill me in on the situation and make me understand?
I can't now. I'm so sorry for that.
Why?
You can hear him speaking casually, even affectionately, and they hear him lying about his location, maintaining a version of reality that does not exist. For many observers, this testimony becomes a turning point. So the jury went into deliberations. I mean, there's no direct evidence pointing at Scott Peterson, but there is a story built on lies and circumstance and questionable behavior on his part. But is that enough? So after months of testimony, evidence, and emotional arguments from both sides, the case is finally placed into the hands of the jury. Deliberations begin, days pass, tension builds inside and outside of the courtroom. Then on November 12th, 2004, the jury reaches a verdict. Scott Peterson is found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Laci Peterson, and second-degree murder in the death of their unborn son, Connor. The courtroom reacts immediately. Lacey's family breaks down in tears, some from grief, others from a sense of justice finally being served. Scott remains still. His expression barely shifts. He shows little visible emotion when the verdict is read out loud. In the penalty phase that follows, the jury must decide Scott's fate. Will he spend the rest of his life in prison, or will he be sentenced to death? He was sentenced to death. So Scott, after receiving his death sentence, is sent to San Quentin Penitentiary, where he spends years on death row. Time moves slowly, appeals are filed, arguments are revisited. His legal team continues to fight, claiming errors were made during the trial process. Outside the prison walls, public opinion remains divided. Some people believe justice was served, while others question whether the case relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence. And as the years pass, the conversation never fully fades. This happened in 2002. Here I am talking about the Scott and Laci Peterson case 24 years later. In 2020, nearly 16 years after the original verdict, a major development changes the course of the case once again. The California Supreme Court overturned Scott Peterson's death sentence, not because of new evidence proving innocence, but because of issues related to the jury selection during the original trial. Court determines that a juror was improperly dismissed, which may have impacted the fairness of the sentencing phase. His conviction remains intact, but his sentence is no longer death. Instead, it was changed to life without the possibility of parole. This means that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. For Lacey's family, the pain does not disappear, but the outcome ensures that he will at least never be released or see the light of day again. Still, the case continues to draw attention, because not everyone is convinced that the story is as simple as it seems. In my last video on the Scott and Laci Peterson case, I did discuss the Innocence Project did decide to take on Scott Peterson's case. There's a popular documentary on Netflix about this, and organizations have reviewed aspects of the case. Their focus is not on proving Scott's innocence outright, but rather on examining whether all evidence was properly considered and whether alternative leads should have been explored, but just weren't. For instance, one of the biggest theories is there was possible burglaries just across the street at the time that Laci went missing. That was never properly investigated by people looking into the disappearance of Laci Peterson's. I mean, these claims continue to ignite debate, because this case has always been a gray area for some people. It was a case built without a confession, without a clear murder weapon, and without a single definitive moment of proof. So some people think that the evidence paints an undeniable, clear picture of proof that Scott is very clearly guilty, while others believe that there's so many unanswered questions that can't possibly mean an automatic guilt. But the uncertainty definitely remains, and it forces people to ask difficult questions about trust, about perception, and about how much evidence is truly needed to know what actually happened in crimes like this. So at the center of all of this is Laci Peterson. She was a woman described as warm, kind, and full of life, a mother who never got a chance to meet her son, a life that ended in a way that no one could have imagined. And no matter where people stand on the case, that loss remains the one undeniable truth. Again, I'm crime thriller author Holly Mae Cormier. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and honoring Laci and Connor. Cases like this stay with us because they don't just give us answers, they give us questions. I want to know what you think. Do you believe that Scott Peterson is guilty, innocent? Or do you think that there's more to the story that has yet to be uncovered? Let me know in the comments. And if you're into deep dive storytelling style true crime like this, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and check out the links in the description to get my novel Memphis. It's a crime thriller about surviving and escaping a narcissist, which I firmly believe Scott Peterson was, and possibly a sociopath too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.